The disillusion started when I would get up at church and be a part of the people at the Mass on the altar and thinking that what was I out doing the night before? And I'm up here being holy, and I have this special place in the world in Mass. People are listening to me, and that has nothing to do with my real life. And so I started to have this real understanding of the duality of people, and it kind of took my, I held up priests and policemen, and that it kind of went, wait a minute, we're all human.
Right.
And I was looking for somebody and something to look up to.
So, welcome to Knowing and Believing, and this is, I think, my fourth conversation with someone off of Craigslist, somewhere around there. This is Valerie Jackson. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tell me your background and what you got going on.
Okay. So I'm really excited and nervous to be here. I kind of did this on a lark. I'm not always on Craigslist, but I was in there, and it happens I'm between jobs. So I what can I do to be productive, do something different, get outside my comfort zone, and saw your listing. So that's one thing I believe already is I think I believe in Kismet.
Kismet. What is Kismet? Sorry, I'm going to move this over there.
So Kismet to me is, I'm just going to go off what just comes to my gut because I really haven't given a lot of thought to that question. It's just automatic, right? So, that's Kismet. It's not faith. It's a little bit of luck and a little bit of fate. And I just sometimes feel it's I don't think
serendipitous to a degree.
Serendipitous, not as strong or meaningful as synchronicity, but it could turn out to be, I guess, because we're just starting our conversation. So where I leave here at the end of this conversation, it may have been big synchronicity happening in my life.
Right. So Kismet.
Yep. So Kismet, how I found you. So I am 56 years old. I keep forgetting that. I think when I first reached out to you, I told you I was 55.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So I was raised in Portsmouth. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and we were brought up Catholic.
Well, of course, you have 7 siblings.
Yeah.
Or 7,
that
6.
kind of explains some of it. Yeah. So I was pretty active in the church from a young age, and also, I would say that I was kind of the rebellious person in my family as far as what I would call now social justice and equality, but back then it was just not fair.
Okay.
And so at the beginning, even early on, I was like, why? So I was born in 1962, and I remember saying, why can't I be an altar girl? Like, what is the big deal? We have altar boys.
Right.
Why can't I be an altar girl? And I would ask that question of parents or of priests, and there was never an answer that was right for me. And so I just, I think from that early age, I was kind of trying to push some boundaries and understand how I could fit my world into the beliefs of the church to which I belonged.
Right. So you growing up saw, like, what is it that allows these boys to be altar boys? And I have the desire to serve in the same way, but yet I'm prevented because I have, different genitalia.
Yeah. And,
a larger corpus callosum, a larger connection between the right and left hemispheres. That's why supposedly, it's a generalization that women have a larger corpus callosum connection between the 2 hemispheres, and they're more adept at multitasking, where men are much more like, please do not enter anything else into right now I'm processing, which to me seems like an advantage, advantage team female. But that's how do you deal with that as a young girl growing up and being told, like, no, this is your place and you can't go outside of it? And because it's interesting to me because Scandinavia was on board with all of the opportunity of equality. I'm getting the wrong words there, but there's a difference between opportunity of equality and enforced equality, right?
Right.
So if we look at the numbers of people being employed across the country and say, all right, there's only this amount of women CEOs, we have to make that number go up. To do that might push against the natural dispersion of interests and propensities that men and women have differently. Equality of opportunity, equality of outcomes. So that's kind of like insisting on all the outcomes have to be equal. That can forcefully manipulate and create pressures and skew things to a point that isn't reflective of the true desires of all of those involved.
Right.
Now, equality of opportunity, where it's truly an equal opportunity for any woman to not have barriers to get to this other typically male position if she wants. That type of situation has been far more prevalent in Scandinavia for longer. And what they've found is that in the data and research of it is that since that's been achieved, as far as there's no hurdles, or there's far, far, far less
Right.
than, that men and women actually more so divide into the stereotypical roles. And this is just data. This is not like a spin on women should be here and men should be there. It's kind of like the pressure of this is what you can't have, therefore I will have it, right?
Right.
That is removed, and it's like, all right, I can go there if I want, but what I really want to do is this,
It's about the ability to be recognized for the contribution that you want to make. And it sounds
Right.
like there's not, because they've worked on that system to build that equality, there's not a better than. It's an either or.
Right,
That's right.
And geez, when you look at their prison reform, everything justice system there, it's amazing compared to ours. Like ours is this just festering sore compared to, and I get it that they're tiny countries in comparison to a massive country, and there's different things involved there. But I mean, they treat their prison inmates with, all right, we expect this behavior out of you, and as you demonstrate that behavior, you get more and more freedom and responsibility, even within this penal system. It's not as much penal system as a restorative justice kind of system. So it's very interesting, very more forward thinking, it seems. But anyways, before I sidetrack, you were a girl in the Catholic Church wanting to serve and be involved as an altar person, and they're like, well, you can't do that.
Right.
And so what's that do to you and your outlook on God and faith and religion and everything else at that point?
So, of course, my initial instinct and my initial response or reaction was, that's not fair.
Right.
I don't think I had the ability or the wisdom or the inclination to be able to build a case.
Right.
But because you're asking me this question, I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot of reflection here as we go through this, because
Sure.
It's been kind of my story that I fight. Like if somebody tells me I can't do something, that's when I'm going to build a case, and I am usually pretty successful. And so I didn't even try. I found other avenues. But I would also say that men versus women that I really never thought about until I was a young working single mom, because I just took the path that I was laid out in front of me in life.
So now they told you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so your reaction was, I can do that, but I can do that in a different form, like
Well,
not involved in
right,
the church.
so I became
but
a lector. I became a lector at the church, which was in the Catholic Church as part of Mass, lay people, and this is way back, right? I graduated high school in 1980 and have only been back for funerals and weddings.
Right.
And so you would get up and read some of the scripture, and you would do a call and response with people with prayer.
Right.
I joined the choir. I joined the CYO or CCD as we had it, and became president of the youth organization. So I had a lot of connection in different ways with the church, and found ways to engage with clergy on a different level because of that level of contribution.
Right. See, and that's the exact thing that I'm seeing there with the Scandinavian example of equality of opportunity. Is like, as soon as they took something and put it out of your reach, it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe I want to reach that. Whereas if it was like, yeah, sure, you can serve, you might have been like, all right, and tried it a couple weeks and then been like, it's great and all, but I find more fulfillment doing this. Or you might have been like, this is great, I shine at this, awesome. But to just take it and put it out of reach as a blanket statement for everybody, it then, no matter if you truly would be good in that position or not, you then fight to achieve that. You spend a lot of your life striving for the ability to have equal opportunity or the opportunity to do that when you're not even offered the experience to see if that's what you really want. You have to battle for equality before you can even find what you're naturally good at.
And
that
huge.
Seems like a waste
Yeah.
because of the people creating the roadblocks.
Yeah. And it's so huge to think of it in that way. And again, it wasn't anything intentional. I'm realizing this as I've been thinking, but also as we're talking. I'm realizing, like, when you asked me that question, I was like, oh, well, actually, this led to this,
Right.
and this led to that. And sometimes those connections I just don't see,
Right.
because I'm living it.
Right.
Really powerful. And I do, I think you're right on with what that data demonstrates and what that impact would be, where barriers were in place, because I have come to love challenges, and it's helped me build my career and build my relationships and ability to lead as a head of my family.
Right.
And have not been put down by many. And so realizing that was illustrated early on is eye-opening for me. Thank you.
So you found ways to be interactive within the church community that you were part of. Where did it go after you were active in the church in the ways they'd allow you to be interactive?
Yes.
How did things grow after that and move forward?
So several things happened that I think all informed the next step. So my dad had a stroke. My dad was an older dad, and he had a stroke when I was 17 years old. So that was when I graduated high school. He had it that summer.
Yep.
And I was involved, as I said, up to the church through that time. So that happened. My sister was engaged and going to be married. And by the way, I was living as a attractive, outgoing girl in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was living the life of that person, a single person, out with my friends. And the disillusionment started. I'm going to connect those dots in a second, but the disillusion started when I would get up at church and be part of the people at the Mass on the altar, and thinking that what was I out doing the night before? And I'm up here being holy, and with this, I'm not holy necessarily myself, but I have this special place in the world in Mass. People are listening to me, and that has nothing to do with my real life.
So you were living, you were upfront interacting with the church,
Yes,
which professes these ways of living.
Yes,
but when you weren't there, you were living something different.
Exactly right.
And I mean, I would say absolutely everyone does that. It's just a spectrum to what degree that is done.
It's true. And I think at that time I went, wait a minute, like, if I can get away with this, and then I looked around me, what else is anybody doing here? So I have this faith in leaders that I think are living a life that they preach, but there's no connection between their life and what happens on a Sunday morning.
So you got to a level of leadership, and then you self-reflected and said, I'm leading and I'm being looked up to, but I'm not living up to it. And then you transferred that same reflection onto the other people in leadership, and you realized, like, how much are these people not really buying into this?
Well, leadership and just grown-ups and adults. So even with my dad, I remember and it's a joke, right, that everybody is so lovely in Mass and loving their neighbor, and they get out to the parking lot and race who's going to get out of the parking lot first. And it really happened. And my dad was a tough father. Everyone in the church community thought he was just the greatest thing ever.
I'm just worried you're going to
I'm gesticulating. I will get expressive.
There we go.
Everyone in the church community was like, he was so charming and lovely and kind. And we saw a workhorse, taskmaster, disciplinarian. We didn't see that side. And so I started to have this real understanding of the yin and the yang and the duality of people. And it kind of took my, I held up priests and policemen, and that it kind of went, wait a minute, we're all human.
Right.
And I was looking for somebody and something to look up to.
Now, your experience reflects much of what my experience has been as well. But why do we have this idea that we think anyone can live up to a consistent set of morals that they always can uphold? It just seems, as you get older, you realize how absurd that is.
I've been accused by my really good friends of doing that with management too. Like I have
Okay.
such a high bar where I work for management that it makes it hard. I'm not working now, any company, that it makes it hard for people to live up to what my expectations are.
Uh-huh.
And I'm curious if that is it just in your leaders in the church that you're talking about in your upbringing, or in other?
Well, a lot of the disillusionment for me came from fairly major missteps of people that I looked up to. Older brothers of friends, parents of friends that, I just kind of thought, these people, how could you go to that extreme? And I'm talking extreme of really poor decisions, and that kind of at a regional level made me lose confidence in just leadership or authority here on earth, if you will, right?
Yep.
And I had it kind of oddly was a confidence booster where I realized, like, no one's got it all together. So don't be so critical on yourself about having to have everything together all the time. Everyone's, falling apart and putting themselves back together constantly. But you just kind of, it seems like you absorb this idea growing up and especially religious contexts where you think that everyone's got the victory over everything and they all really believe what they profess to believe. And as you get older and more honest with, or at least more open with people, you start to realize, like, everyone has questions, everyone makes mistakes, everyone, hopefully doesn't make huge mistakes, but there's a lot of people that make huge mistakes. And it's like, what do you do with that? For me, it's made me realize, just with even relatively menial things that I can't consistently avoid or whatever in my life, it's given me a lot more sympathy for people like that have heroin addictions or were abused in their life and are transferring that abuse to others. These are incredibly ingrained and generational things that are so hard to overcome. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't in any way make it allowable, and it doesn't make it in any way something that should not be worked on. But I have these days a lot more forgiveness and grace, if you will, towards most everyone. The hardest time that I have is with people that profess, like a certainty of what they believe through religion, because it's just when I look at it, I see justification for some of the most cruel things coming from those types of belief systems. And the people I'm thinking of, I'm not assigning that kind of behavior to them, but I see the trajectory of that kind of belief system where it, expounded upon exponentially, where it kind of goes, and that's a really hard thing for me to grapple with. If people, and I was just talking with a friend of mine yesterday about this, if people were to take belief and put it in a uncertainty corral, that's kind of where it belongs, in my opinion. Something that's in there that needs work, needs attention, and needs to be continually thought about and worked upon. But if you have a certainty corral in your head and you put belief in there, what things that go in a certainty corral would be like math, who your mother is, who your sister is, who your wife is. These things, relative certainty. I know you can break things down to where nothing's true, but those are kind of certain things. But if you throw that kind of thing in a certainty corral, you don't need to work on the things in the certainty corral. I know who my mother is. I don't need to work on that. I don't need to work on, that math is true, or that when I drop things, they'll drop, But what you do is you've self-deceptively put it in there, in my opinion. And instead of leaving it in there, anything in the certainty corral essentially is a tool. You pull things out of there to help you work on things in the uncertain corral, right? But if you put something in there that's not truly a tool, that is something that needs to be worked on, but you don't ever work on it, you say, no, this is certain. What you do is you end up working on the corral, the surroundings of that thing. So you start to develop a culture and traditions and everything else that keep anything from coming into that corral to harm it and to keep it from getting out. So you develop all these, cultural signals and everything else, maybe a specific way of dressing or a specific way of eating, and these propensities to not look deeper into the things that you believe around this thing that you've falsely put in the certainty corral. And to me, that's the real big danger there, is to take something so important like the things that we project into the unknown. Like, we don't know these things, but we think this is what it might be. Like, belief is a hypothesis,
right?
And to take a hypothesis and put it in the place of certainty when it's not, you're going to start doing a lot of other experiments that are going to fall flat because you might not actually be able to be certain about that. So the other things fall apart. I'm on a tangent.
I'm with you, and I'm thinking about the folks where they spend their time. And I know certainty is a fixed. If it's truly certainty, it's fixed.
Right. And some people, when you ask them, like mathematicians, they're like, true certainty, real certainty is almost nearly impossible.
Yeah. But I'm saying, if you have someone that maybe does not even think about belief, like you said, but it's just, this is their comfort zone, is that certainty. And
right.
Or when you say that they've been conflated, what is it that gets someone to make that change, to break down one of those barriers and say, wait a minute, I had to wake up.
To break out of the certainty, to take something uncertain out of the certainty corral.
Yes.
I think huge, horrible things happening, or things that come out of left field that are just like breaking down of the worldview. I mean, I was there. I was attempting. I kept trying to put things in the certainty corral, and they kept jumping out. And it's a really hard thing. And mentally, you can come to a place where you're like, all right, I get it. This doesn't go in the certainty corral. I'll be fine. But then your emotions, like this other part of you, come along, for me, like months behind that, and then are like, and you have a little bit of a freak out. But yeah, I think it's on the level of like being molested by a priest, or a relative, someone close to you dying and not having sufficient answers that match up to what you believe, like seeing children suffering, things like this, the big horrible things, you can really easily hurt those things in the certainty corral that shouldn't be in there.
That it's so interesting, because I do believe that many cases you can see something such as horrible conditions for children and see it, but you've never really seen it and internalized it. And so there's that faith part, because there's something. What's different the fourth time you hear or see something when it sinks in, right?
Right.
I think it's about readiness in our own soul and in our own minds. Can I even take that all in? That we may not even recognize. It may be unconscious, but something is protecting us from really taking that in. And that's the questions I have. Like, what is that?
Right.
Is it all from familiarity? Because I've seen something like that before. I know how to react. So I'm going to go back to that part of my brain and, trigger those instincts. Or is it something bigger?
Those are biases, it seems. Like
right.
The confirmation biases. There's so many psychological biases that once you're imprinted with something, those natural instinct biases kind of take over. They kind of welcome in whatever you've been told, and they put it in the back, and then they stand guard as biases.
Right.
Anything you could believe about the Old Testament, New Testament, whatever, comes in as a question that maybe another religion believes, but you're part of the one true religion. And so it's ding, your bias just deflects that, dismisses it as just ridiculous, and it's not until something gets between the armor there and, really gets at your emotional core and rational core and combines them and says, there's an issue here that you don't have an answer to. You might say you do, but you realize you don't. And when that gets in there and it'll fester, and sometimes for years. And eventually I think that those are the kind of things that, for me, it was getting to know gay people. And it sounds so pathetic to say, but growing up, I grew up in a very conservative religious environment, and the kids that were gay were not coming out of the closet. And I was one of the kids that would tease them occasionally, not really harshly, but it was definitely, we were not welcoming to these kids, and when I got to an age of realizing, being out in the more normal world, and got to know individuals that were gay, and got to, sit down and eat with them and share life with them to a degree, and get to realize, like, they had no choice in this. This is what they realized when they went through puberty. It's like, oh, I'm attracted to that, And then how can you, if you're a Calvinist, I guess you can justify it, but if you believe that people have choice and that we're choosing, and it's an idea of, salvation and choice and all that, how can you put something as, completely wrong and unacceptable that's saddled on that person out of no choice of their own? I don't know how to justify pushing their experience in human suffering deeper, like to condemn them, even like to think of a kid in the system that I grew up in that realizes eventually that they're gay, but they know this culture does not accept that. The people that are the very closest to them, they lose that and they become an outcast.
That's right.
And I couldn't imagine if I didn't have the closest relationships that I need to make me a confident enough person to deal with all the other crap in this world. What if you didn't have that, just out of no choice of your own, and then you had to hide it forever? And I can't look at the core principles of the Bible and Christ, which I believe are good core principles, and say that it is consistent across the totality of a literal interpretation of the Bible, and apply that to my life now and think that that's good. To push human suffering further down that hole is just not okay. And
I can't even think that it would be. And because from a loving deity, right? That doesn't it doesn't equate. I think we have a lot in common. My moment, that paradigm shift moment for me, came when I was involved in church. I was in the CCD, and I was senior in high school or so. Remember, I said I graduated in 1980. And, I didn't even realize, again, while I was living it, but Vietnam wasn't that far behind.
It's like when you look at now, you look back at like the Gulf War. That was just yesterday, and you're like, oh, that was way long ago.
What do you mean those are oldies on the songs? And
Nirvana is an oldie? What?
Right? So anyway, I remember somehow, because we were old enough, we were having a conversation, and the priest was talking to us old enough people about marriage and love and all that. And I don't know where I got this from. So, we were talking about these other instances of just injustice is what I felt. And I remember, because I was reading things and aware of the news and whatever, and I remember asking the question, I said, wait a minute, because they were talking about procreation and marriage between a man and a woman, and gay wasn't even on my mind at that moment. And I said, wait a minute, are you telling me that if, like, say somebody came home from war and they were paralyzed from the waist down and they could never have kids, are you saying even if they were single, they could never get married in the Catholic Church?
So the Catholic Church, if you're not able to reproduce, you shouldn't get married?
This is my memory of being that age, and it was a moment for me. So this was what was said. Okay. And I was like, what? And I said, well, who else needs love more than this poor person coming from war who's paralyzed? And I can't believe that. And it was it was like I completely went over a boundary. And and that started so many other things that I thought, how could a loving God do that? This isn't fair, and simplified things, and thinking about even Adam and Eve, right? The story at the beginning, and put them in the garden with the temptation. And when I became a parent, having a moment like, why would I tempt my kids? Why would I ever do that? If I'm a loving parent, why would I put something there to test them? You just wouldn't. So a lot of stuff just went pulled back.
The hard thing for me as a father is like, all right, there's no way I'm going to take off and leave my kids and leave them a note.
Right.
And say, this is good enough for you to believe that I love you, and I'll like email you once in a while. Like email, that's a little outside of like, you know, what we're expected to believe is like impressions from God or whatever. But, you know, for an all-powerful deity to be divinely silent, the divine silence is an issue that, you know, a theological issue that people wrestle with. To be silent, but to say, here's everyone else's experience that we deem okay to put in this collection of books.
Right.
And this is enough for you. And you need to have enough faith off of this note from other people that were inspired by it. And I get it that there is awe and wonder, and I have an inclination that there is something beyond. And it's very possible that many of these things in that book are real. It's absolutely possible. But the degree at which, as I was saying before, people hold this as a thing of certainty, the degree at which they hold that to there is inappropriate, and that's when you get the harmful aspects of religion, in my opinion. If you hold them as, uncertain, but they become things that can grow and be further influenced. You know, we don't still sacrifice animals, and we don't stone adulterers. There's all these things from the Old Testament that we don't do anymore. Right. And why can we not continue to, so.
It's, I watched a show the other night, and the show was done, it was a history series on Netflix. Can I say anything on this?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so it was a history series. And
hardly anyone's listening anyways.
Oh, well, after this one, maybe they will be.
Yeah, right. I like your thinking.
Okay, so it's the first time I've heard of this. So it was on the Nicholas Alexander, the Tsar and all the family.
Oh, the last Tsar. Yeah, I've seen that advertised.
But here's the deal. I've never seen this model. And then I read on it to see what does this mean. So they said it's 80% drama, 20% documentary. So it's a drama with actors and people doing the scenes, and interspersed are historians, professors, actual film footage. And so I thought, I'm so glad I read about that, because I would have been so confused watching what's real with the what is.
Right.
And, when I think about the Bible, I know that there are some things that we have turned up in history, that they find an ossuary, or they find things, actual artifacts that seem to support the story. Right. But I wonder how much of it is, drama, and how much of it is actual documentary. Sure. And so do I think that, Jonah went in a whale? It's possible. So anything's possible. I believe anything's possible, but that's highly unlikely in my mind.
Right.
But somebody had to make something bigger maybe. It doesn't mean that the meaning behind it isn't meant to be, or it's not important, but I totally get it. There are some things that just don't equate. I don't think that I believe in a God or a certain being. I do think the Bible has good intentions. I don't know that those even make sense. I don't believe.
Yeah, that's a hard thing for me as well, though, because you look at, what determines, and this is an argument I have with people that are still in the certainty camp, what determines good and bad?
Right.
Is it just solely based on human suffering? So we can continue to factory farm and everything else, yet still say that dogs and cats, for some special reason, are sentient beings, and we can't leave them in a car and let them, I'm obviously not professing this is something we should do, but a pig is a very intelligent, highly social animal. Why do they get to be factory farmed, and yet we don't factory farm dogs? And when we see, Asian countries that eat dogs, it's just so offensive to us. But, so that the idea of our moral formation and how we deal with all of that, and by what standard we kind of uphold our beliefs, and where they have their underpinnings, is so confusing when you get into it.
It's so confusing, and it goes back to, for me, thinking about, talking about role models or leaders having to be perfect. Feeling disappointed. Everything feels like a black and white. And I think it probably led to me acting a little black and white.
Right.
but everything's so much more gray.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really hard to put it in. And the older I get, the more I realize that not too many things are.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, things are more complex than they seem if you really keep peeling off the layers. It's a lot to think about. I'm just thinking about your comments about animals and, bringing my kids to the zoo when they were little. It wasn't even in my awareness.
Oh, yeah. Never thought two seconds about it. And now I'm, because it's part of the national conversation, right, and the, extreme left is much louder these days. It forces you to think about it a little bit, like, all right, do I really care? Do these things really think? And yeah, that animal does look pretty miserable there. And how is it okay that, because you think about it, like, I had this interaction on Instagram with a person that I follow that is a big fisherman, mm-hmm, right? And I honestly don't have a problem with people fishing. It's not my point here. But, he goes out fishing and, brings it in and takes it home and eats it. And someone had said something, far left leaning, something about cruelty to animals. And he's like, it's okay. We're eating this. It's not being wasted. It's like, well, how's that a justification? If someone comes and, starts to attack your kid and they're like, no, it's okay. Yeah. We're going to eat him.
Right.
So, it's a humanist approach at that point. Fine. But even so, like, if I show up in someone's yard in the morning with a fishing pole and everything else, but I just have like a little mouse lure on the end and I catch their cat and, right, take it home and eat it.
Right.
How is that okay or not okay compared to the fishing? Or do we then, right, base the value of what's good and bad based on what we perceive as different levels of consciousness, When you start to get into breaking all that down, none of it really makes sense unless you look at it all in a very, very self-centered manner. Like, anything that I care about gets special treatment. Anything that we care about, pets, they get special treatment. Like, don't you dare touch my, peekapoo or whatever, right, but I'll, go out and fish and or, Japanese have these, they toy dogs and, right, whatever. They're so cute, and that they go home and they love after they slaughter all these dolphins.
I know. Oh.
So it doesn't make sense, but we just kind of acclimate to this situation, and we, to a lot of times, use religion and our worldviews to, manipulate the situation and excuse it. And it's just weird.
It's weird, and it's a lot to think about, right? So even just as you explain that, right? So it goes, maybe it's easy to say, I don't like veal. I've never liked veal, but I don't like it because of what they grow. And I'm like, what makes that different, as you said, than a cow, whatever? That one's easy, and I don't really have to think about it because I don't consume it. But if you really look at the world through that way of, like, what is the harm? Is there harm being done to anything in this process? You almost have to go in a bubble because, like, there's everything.
You can't walk to your car without harming something.
Right.
You can't be a vegan and eat factory farm food without killing animals.
Right.
The level of slaughter that happens to just run-of-the-mill rodents and everything else when they harvest wheat and everything else is huge. So you're not getting it out there either. And I heard it described the other day, comparing the life of like we banned dog fighting,
right,
in the States, and I think it was Michael Vick was, mm-hmm, his name, is, yep, doing that. He, yep, goes to prison and everything else. Yet we're factory farming pigs. You look at the life of like cockfighting that they still do in like Central America and stuff. Mm-hmm. The life of one of those roosters, yep, right? They get all the food they want.
Yep.
They get free range. They get really good food. And they generally have to do 2 to 4 fights after like 2 years of living the high life. Mm-hmm. And if they are successful in those 2 to 4 fights, they'll never fight again, and they'll just mate the rest of their life. If I'm looking at being a chicken or a rooster or something, right, I want that opportunity. Compared to being a boiler chicken, right, in a factory farm where they're crammed into these things like this wide, and supposedly they suffer from like real chronic pain because, yep, they're not even able to move, and they only live for like a month or something, right, crazy, And again, look at it logically. This thing that we see as just horrible and cruel because we see 2 animals trying to kill each other, that is a far, far superior existence than a factory farm chicken, yet we are blind to seeing that. Now, if I compare, like, I listen to Joe Rogan podcast a lot, and he's a big hunter, with like a bow and arrow hunter. And he won't eat factory farmed food, but he hunts. He said, look, this is too bad. I can't partake in factory farming, but I like to eat meat. I don't agree with, the
sport hunting.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's like, this animal to die at the hands of a wolf or a bear or a mountain lion or something else is about 50 times worse than getting hit by one arrow. Me going out and hunting is not creating anything worse than starvation or death by their natural means, right? And so that's how he looks at it. And I don't have a lot of problem with that, other than that I'm vegetarian and I just don't eat meat. So and if people want to eat factory farmed food, I'm not really in the business of trying to shame people into doing one thing or the other.
Right.
But the moral foundations of those things are very interesting to me, that we make dogfighting and cockfighting illegal, yet we still maintain factory farming. It's just...
Yes, and there's a third choice, right? So saying I'd rather be this than this, but what about neither?
Right.
What kind of world would it be if we didn't even have to worry about that and everything could just live to what it's supposed to be?
Well, it's a
right?
It's a horribly cruel world outside of the bubble of human existence that we've made, though.
Right.
I mean, we killed all the predators that would kill us, pretty much, and we're still working on the sharks, but I'm sure we'll get there. But I mean, we have the luxury of saying, let's take this, very artificial life that we live compared to nature.
Right.
If you could hear the screams of all nature dying, it would be horrendous.
Yeah.
But we've created a safe environment for us because we're intelligent enough. And so we killed everything that could prey on us, pretty much. And, were we to let all these other animals, be at peace and not interfere in their lives, they'd still be going through the same thing. Not on the factory farming level, but they'd still be being preyed upon by everything else. So where is the choice in there? I have no idea. It's a very complex issue that I don't know.
And it's easy, as a consumer, to put blinders on and say, I don't want to watch that movie that's going to show me the truth. That will change. It's going to be a changing point in my life when I watch that movie, and then I'm going to have to live that. I made
my family watch Blackfish before we went to SeaWorld.
Oh, I watched that. What did you think? What did they think?
It was a really good, but a
really
lot of them were like, I don't want to watch this. We're going to SeaWorld tomorrow.
Yeah.
I was like, I haven't seen it, but I think it's important for us to just watch it, and then you see these massive, killer whales, and their fins are just like, and it's I can hear people thinking in their minds like, oh, you soft lefty pinko, blah, blah, blah. But I mean,
with you.
Don't turn away from it. It's like, it's a legitimate argument. Like, should you really, like, especially a level of consciousness at that level, like the intelligence there's an undue amount of pain. It's not too dissimilar from putting someone in a dead-end job in a cubicle for the entirety of their life.
Right.
But at least that person lives in an environment where they somewhat have a choice to get out of that, but, that orca is stuck.
I was in Quebec City last weekend, and we went to the aquarium, and my son and my grandson came with me, and it was different. It was much smaller than the big aquarium that I've seen. There were animals outside, but still, I can't see it the same anymore, right? So this is the first time I've been to anything with any caged animals in a long, long, long time.
Right.
And there is some greatness about really getting that attention, getting the food, all of that, and then what? Like it goes back to us, right? I mean, do you want a short, painful, a short, lovely life that may end in pain, or do you want something that's going to take you a little?
Watch any like a lion just circle things. It's like, oh, geez. I mean, let them. People should fly to Africa and get in their little protected cars and drive through their territory.
Right.
Like that's how it should go. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't even know we need that anymore. So I think with technology, that's something we don't need. We can get a camera there. It's almost the same, right? It's way different than before you could see things live or have drones.
Maybe we should make people like, you want to go see him you walk out there.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
And
Or
so
you give a donation to that particular animal, making sure, like, really, that could be kind of cool.
I know I wouldn't be seeing any
No, I
lions
wouldn't
if that's how you had to see
No,
them.
no, that's true.
All right, we got
Okay,
sidetracked
little bit
there. You were
animals.
somewhere
I don't know where
up
I
front
was.
leading and feeling like you weren't living a consistent life or something.
Yeah, so it was there, and then I saw it in, like, family life and in the church, and it just continued to be that I would find other ways. So I really never
What do you mean by that?
that I would find other ways. If something was not open, I would
Oh,
find
right.
another door,
Okay.
or I'd make a door.
Yep.
And so I don't know what we're talking about anymore.
So you were up front leading out, and you had a bit of
I
disillusionment
had a bit of
because you saw
disillusionment.
the duality of your life, leading out, professing these things, but
Right.
living this way.
Right. And then
Which to me is a okay thing. I think if more people understood, like, this is what I'm striving for, but honestly, this is what I'm doing, and I'm gonna live this, and it's gonna come together in a moderation at some point, and I'm gonna,
so for me, that's all about transparency.
Yeah.
So the difference is, if I have come to the place in my life, which I'm very thankful that I'm just human, I am who I am today. I might change tomorrow, might be something different, but I have no shame anymore. I don't feel anything that I am not enough. I'm kind of loving myself for the first time. And so I can be totally human with people. And so if somebody is totally human and saying, you know what, we had plans today, but I'm just not feeling like seeing people. And it's okay with you because that's a part of me. Some
Right.
days I do that, some days I don't. And this we agree, and it, I'm transparent.
Right.
It's so much different than me never letting you see that side, right? So
Are you fairly introverted or extroverted?
I think I'm both.
Really?
I think I'm an ambivert. I've been reading about that because when I'm on, if I'm doing something in front of a group or I'm at work and I'm feeling that way, or I can help. I'm very extroverted if there's anything I can help.
Okay.
But I've come to like my own time. I feel recharged with it, and I do need some time for self-reflection.
Sure.
But
Okay.
I think what I'm trying to say is that I totally believe and love that people are not perfect. I want somebody that's going to mess up because they're going to be a different person the next day. And we all are human that is so many different places,
Well, it's
right?
not enough to mess up. If you mess up and have transparency and a will to improve and learn
That's
from
right.
your mistakes,
Right.
very valuable.
But you can't just say I did it and then do it again the next day.
Right.
But that transparency of just being fallible, that it's
Right,
it's
exactly.
safe to be fallible. It changes, I believe, and transcends
Yeah.
relationships. And I have two
that's
friends
huge.
that have just recently said to me, "I really, really appreciate that you don't get mad at me if I cancel on you." I'm like, "It's your thing. I don't care. And if you have a problem with me, you'll tell me. And guess what? I'm going to cancel on you. But I'm not going to lie and say I'm not feeling well. I'm not going to say something came up.
I think you're my female middle-aged doppelganger.
I'm not kidding you. That's what I'm saying. Why is that? Middle age is generous.
Well,
Thank you.
Like the first 10 years of my wife and I's marriage, and I've said this on this podcast before, so sorry if you've listened to other ones and have to hear it again, but the first 10 years of our marriage, my wife had the delusion that I was a infallible, wonderful person, and I'd kind of push something in a selfish manner, and she, it's okay. And I'd be like, she's still happy. She's still fine. I'll keep being selfish.
You recognize your own selfishness?
This is a reflectiveness back on it, right?
Okay.
I'm naturally a very self-centered. I mean, we're all self-centered because we process everything through ourselves.
That's right.
Now, I'm above and beyond that. Very hard to get out of my own skin, I think, sometimes. But just in general, a selfish person that I need to be transparent about that and work on it. It's the first step.
That's huge.
Well, it's a hugely bad thing as well. So
It is a thing.
Yeah.
And it's part of who you've been.
Yeah. Well, so I spent 10 years of being a fairly manipulative, emotionally... I guess you would call it emotionally abusive in that, like, if I didn't get my way or I wanted something, I would use emotion as a means of pulling back and kind of withholding affection and love and everything else as a way of getting my way. So that, that's a bad thing. And it was never a situation of being actively abusive or emotionally abusive in an active manner. But it was always, I distance and try and manipulate and control in that manner. And it's not healthy. But at the same time, my wife was under this delusion that it's okay if I keep praying for him and if I keep being a selfless person and in her view at the time, a good wife, eventually he'll come around. And I'm constantly thinking like, man, this is a great life for me. I get to do whatever I want. And,
Yeah.
And eventually she had a breaking point, that she was just getting worn down and I wouldn't help enough when the kids were young. And so she just got worn out, and it just got to a point where, we were in a lot of debt for financial adventures that I was going in, like owning properties and stuff that she was managing. And it was a lot of stress on her. And it just got to a breaking point for her. And I had to hear from her, but then a lot of other sources that like, yeah, Trent, you're a bit of an asshole. And the behavior we've seen you model is not healthy, and it's not going to be good. And those were really hard things to accept, like just as a pride thing,
No kidding.
Like to it's not until I heard it from multiple sources. I couldn't hear it from just her because I could manipulate it and twist it and dodge and, but hearing that from multiple sources and the amount of disappointment in myself and shame and guilt and, everything that comes with that, it's very hard to bear. But at some point you have to choose like, all right, am I going to turn this around or am I going to pretend it's not there? What are you going to do? And, her and my children are the most important things to me. So there's only one thing I could do. So I've done everything I can to change that. But the thing I found in that is a huge amount of self-realization in the transparency, like you're talking about. The just being transparent with myself and others that, okay, I'm not a real social person. I'm not naturally selfless. I'm not really an entertaining upfront guy. There's a lot of things I'm not, and there's a lot of things that are not good either. But by just talking about these, it keeps it on the forefront of my mind, and it helps me be transparent with myself, which is the first real step, I think.
It's big, isn't it? Just being able to really look at that, and that's what I'm just sitting here very impressed that you're renaming these characteristics that are not something that you were proud of, and you took it and you heard it and you're renaming it again and saying it, and I'm just struck by that.
It's something that you have to keep telling yourself lest you slip back into it very easily. I can go there, but it's just a hard thing to come to that point of realizing that and to turn it around, and then to allow the time that it takes the people that you've hurt to allow them the time to gain your trust back, for them to heal and trust you again. That takes time, and that's really discouraging as well, because there was a time when it came that she came to a point of being honest with herself about what was going on and was honest with me about it, to where she would kind of just be at a distance and kind of recoil to me to a degree, which was like, whoa,
totally different.
First time,
yeah.
And that was really hard. But luckily I've been honest about it and honestly trying to reverse that. And she will say that it's night and day better, which is, whew, but I still have a really hard time in other areas of my life where I can be very condescending and talk down to people that maybe still have a position of belief that I don't agree with. Okay. And like where both you and I might look at a specific person and say, that's stupid.
Yeah.
How do you, within ambiguous as life really is,
yep.
How do you learn to say, all right, I believe that position is stupid. How do I kindly and lovingly share with this person that I don't agree with them and that it might be wrong, and let's openly and respectfully talk about it, rather than just saying that's stupid, because my wife is still very much a very very stringent believer in what I would consider a certainty type of way. And so that creates a lot of points of conflict and potential conflict, and it's a very difficult thing to avoid. And I have a very strong propensity for just being very straight about things. I really appreciate when people call me stupid, because it's an opportunity to engage, right? Or call me rude or an asshole or whatever, because it's like, oh wow, now we can have a genuine conversation. Right. Like, all right, I don't take offense to that. You have an opinion that's contrary to what I'm holding right now. This could be interesting. Rather than, what do you do for work? Well, this is what I do for work, and how's the weather there? And but that's just a different personality type that is me, not other people.
That's right, because you are very confident. So even just talking about what you just talked about, your challenges, that to me, when vulnerability equals confidence. And it's funny because just the other day I watched another show that I've had 3 people tell me to watch on, it's Brene Brown. She's a qualitative analyst, and so talks to people about trust and safety and shame. Yeah. And her, one of her things I didn't even realize that came out of my mouth is that courage is, you can't have courage without vulnerability. Yeah. And so what I'm saying to you is being able to just talk out loud about your vulnerabilities is courageous. And I would say that that is something that I have found in my life. Not everyone feels that way. So you're ready to take criticism, and you think, I'll take it, but not everybody is where you are and able to hold it. And so I think understanding that as at a beginning, because again, there's that, I expect a high bar that everybody's here. And it's really hard to go, well, maybe somebody's not open to what I feel like I want to share. Right. They don't want your feedback, maybe. That's one thing, is find out that. And the other thing is that I think is really important, and maybe this is something you've tried, but if I was sharing something with you that I believed that was really stupid in your mind, and you said, well, I think that's stupid because... That
could be very offensive.
Well, I would hope you would start by acknowledging what I said. Right. And in acknowledging it, to say, oh, I see how you could feel that way if you do. I mean, I think there's a part that you need to try to understand where that person's coming from. Because they're not saying that to be antagonistic, I would hope. There's something they believe. And if you're challenging a belief, you're getting into feelings. Beliefs are about feelings, not facts, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Feelings are the... So I'm working on a documentary right now about my own loss of faith. I'm very scared to attempt to finish it, because I'm worried that I'm going to create something that no one cares about, and that's just my own pride. Right. And I'm still at a point where I really don't know that I have much to say other than what I've lost. Like, I don't want to put just discouragement out into the world. Right. I'd like to find my own version of hope and a way of coping with life that helps others. And I don't know that I'm there yet, but it's like 3 years since we started this thing, and I'm still not really any closer to putting together the final film. And I totally lost like where I was going with that. I'm like, every time you switch a topic like that, I'm like with you so quickly that I'm like, where were we just a second ago? Doppelgängers.
I was asking you if anyone needed your opinion, and do you acknowledge what they're saying? Because they're coming from a place of belief and feelings versus facts.
So feelings, there we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow, good job. Feelings are the thing that came up with me about 2 years into losing faith. Like 2 years in, it was still an intellectual exercise, an intellectualization of my worldview. Yep. It was still kind of like, oh, this is that, and here's cognitive dissonance, and here's cognitive biases, and here's all these situations, and here's the rationality that deals with this, and here's the psychology of why I believe that, and the way I protect it, and maybe why it might not be true, and blah, blah, blah. Those are all intellectual processes that turn on lights and, shut doors and open doors, and that's fine. But then, like, some crazy person comes screaming down the hall that's your emotions eventually, that's just lost and is bouncing off everything. And like I was posting a lot of stuff through this entity that we've created, Vast Noodle, and staying active on Facebook and sharing what I was going through. But it came to a place where I was attempting to at least meditate and interact with and share my process consistently through social media. And it just got to be way too much. Like I got to a point where I did not, and I'm still kind of there, where I don't like to be alone with my thoughts. Like I truly have not attempted to meditate because of the discomfort of the existential angst and anxiety. And that, those emotions, dealing with that is really hard, but they're a real thing. And they're what make us human, right? And I'm going along using a materialist point of view to process my meaning and purpose. But that's a square peg in a round hole.
You got it.
And you're not going to find meaning and purpose through a materialist point of view. And a subjective point of view, or spiritual, subjective, experiential point of view, is not going to give you a clear picture on the data either. It's a combination of the materialist inquisition and the subjective personal experience. It's the combination of those two that creates the picture of what's beyond, I think. And I think I came with the full-on, new atheist kind of critique and arguments and everything against religion, and realized that you cannot argue with a materialist point of view as far as the thing that it eliminates.
Right.
Because it's objective evidence. There's no getting around that. But it doesn't explain still things like purpose and meaning.
Right. And
hence, like, why on earth emotion and all that.
It's wow, there's a lot to think about, and I think you've really hit something that resonates with me, because lately I've had a couple occasions where I've received a message that in one
now are we talking text or
God? I was
God?
just going to tell you. I was going to kind of skip right over that, but you mentioned it. I mean, you got me on it. So I actually went to an intuitive.
An intuitive. So I paid money to go to this woman who said that she was fabulous, that she just hears and sees things for me. I can believe it or not. Mm-hmm. And she'll just pass along what is said or heard. And so it was awesome, and I would go again. But one of the things she said was, which I think might be a lot like you, is I do a lot of talking about I think, I know, and I don't do a lot of I feel. So when I don't value my feelings at this point. All right. So you're talking to Intuit. I'm sorry. Let me interrupt.
It's okay.
I took my feelings and put them behind me as a way of, first of all, saving my marriage.
Yep.
Because I felt like I wanted to do this, or I wanted to go on a surf trip, or I wanted to buy that. Yeah. And I wasn't being fair because of my feelings. So I took my feelings and I was like, all right, put feelings back over there.
Yes.
Use the logic of fairness, rationality, and reason to treat my wife fair. Yeah. Use that and do fair. So I did fair. And then, my feelings and everything else were telling me one thing, and I was given this view of God and religion that are intermingled, obviously. And I was like, these feelings are misleading me. I cannot trust them. So again, more feelings back there. And then when I was in high school and early part of college, that was kind of the beginning of trying to protect myself from feelings. I had a really bad kind of relationship and breakup that, I was like, protect feelings, so that first of all, they're protected. And then I had to protect myself from my feelings and protect my wife and family from my feelings. And then I had to dismiss my feelings from my own process of understanding all of this. Right. And so I still empathize and feel things very deeply for like people that are on the other side of injustice, but on the quick and common interactions, I'm very unempathetic and uninterested in people in general, which sounds, but there's a very, very, like if I, on HBO, there's the series, I think it's Barbershop or something, where LeBron James and other athletes, and then usually like a comedian will just sit and talk about life. And I found myself just crying in the tub watching it and just, empathizing with their experience of life and injustice and inequality and what they were talking about, and seeing that. I empathize very deeply with that. But on a common, shallow level, I'm very detached from the day-to-day kind of. Like I've tried to go to a food pantry and help people once a week, but on the surface interaction level of it, I'm just like, there's no hope for you, man. I don't feel this. I don't feel like I'm doing anything here.
We are so much alike. So I volunteered here. First of all, don't want to forget to tell you that about feelings and emotions. Feelings and emotions. So I volunteered. That's it. Feelings and emotions. But when I came up to Portland, which was only in 2006, I wanted to do some volunteering. I was working at the hospital, and I volunteered patient sitting. And in my head, I had this vision, a romanticized vision of what I'd be doing, and it wasn't it. Then I tried teaching English as a second language. Wasn't my bag. I've gone to sign up for the food pantry or other things, and I know my heart wants to do it, and I feel like I have so much to give, but when I get there in the real practical time, what am I going to do? And am I going to have a hard time with it? I
don't feel like I'm reaching anybody.
It's because it's one. But, one thing you say to one person will make a difference. So I get it, but I feel you because I feel the same thing. Yeah. Here I am. I'm in between jobs. And when I was still employed, I just got done in May. I was like, I really want to go down to the border and just take some of those babies, and I'll just take them. I'll just take them in my car and run. Like I could do it. So what? And now I have the time, and I tried to help the asylum
I would
seekers.
Advise not kidnapping children.
I know, but I was like, but at least they'll be somebody safe. I know I wouldn't really do it, but that was my instinct. Go help big time is what. And I hear you saying one small thing, but it isn't one small thing because it is all related. Yeah. So one small thing for one person turns to something for someone else, and I think it's huge. But anyway, I'm still looking for that right thing. And I'm going to be going with a friend, a new acquaintance that I've met, who's going to bring me to some volunteering opportunities. Because I also had this real issue about obligation, about trying something and then saying you have to, you commit to doing it for a certain amount of days or weeks. Right. But this is related, connecting back to that. I did volunteer and still continue to volunteer at the Center for Grieving Children. Ooh. Do you know we have that in Portland?
No.
So it's an awesome organization. It's a national organization. The one in Portland's been there for I don't know how many years, decades. And what it is, it's a safe place for any kids that have lost a loved one to go. And they have an hour a week that they go, and they can process feelings and be with others who have had a same loss. This group has expanded, so they also have a bereaving parents group, so parents that have lost a child. TLC for loved ones that are, in long-term care or hospice care. So there's several different groups that they have, parents, kids, and the kids get broken up into different age groups. So I have always had an attraction and affinity for things related to death. And a couple of years ago said, I'm going to do this. I feel ready to do the Center for Grieving Children. And I had a volunteer and say that I would be a volunteer for a year. And that was like, what if, based on my volunteer experience, I'm not going to like it. But the thing that was so transformative is to be what I do there is I'm a facilitator for a group. So I and another facilitator will have a group of 8, 7, 10 kids, and we hold that space for them for an hour to do whatever we're going to do. Could be an activity, could be just talking, playing, whatever. So, but in order to be qualified to be a facilitator, you have to go through, I think it was a 40-hour training program on grief and feelings and emotions. So like you, I had put all my feelings behind for most of my life, actually until about 5 years ago, because I was just getting things done, working, taking care of kids, just going. And I didn't even consider feelings. Like I didn't even have a hobby because everything was about my kids. I was a single parent.
Right.
Or I was working. And so this course was the beginning of changing my life, my recent change, because you had to learn everything about feelings, because you had to experience it for yourself to understand things that kids would be feeling and to learn the skill of facilitating. And one of the things that I took, there were a lot of different great things that I took with me, but one of them was that they really said feelings are emotions, and the word motion is intentional. They are to be worked through. So that you shouldn't carry a backpack of feelings around on your back, because it's just going to weigh you down. There's some feelings that are unexpressed or unworked through. You can't express every feeling. But if you think about that as something is, you're feeling something, you act on it, you express it, whether it's in writing or verbally to the person you're with, you do something with it. And if you don't, it's going to be back there influencing things.
Yeah. No, I've seen that in I've seen that in my life and in others that I'll leave nameless. But if you don't unpack it, it's just going to stay in the backpack on your back, and it's going to be heavy, and it's going to influence and unbalance everything you're doing.
You got it. And so for me, I feel free because I don't have any feelings unexpressed. Today, I am honest and open.
That's a statement I haven't heard. I feel free because I don't have any feelings that are unexpressed.
I don't. And I did it with you. And I didn't need to, but I did. I said, I'm not sure I'm going to want to do this. Can I think about it? Like, I'm not going to just bail on you. That was my transparency. I'm like, I'm just going to go with it. He's going to get that. And you wrote back a lovely answer, and I was like, okay, I'm in. And so that worry was still there a little bit, but I was committed.
Yeah.
But because I said it out loud, it takes some of your power away to make me feel nervous, because I've already told you I am also.
Yeah.
So I am.
You seem so nervous right now, too.
I'm not anymore, but I was when I came in. But I do disclose a lot. Maybe I don't need to, but I'm a discloser.
I've never heard that term really either, but that is disclosing in any way a negative thing or an ability to control or manipulate a situation?
Absolutely.
Really? Because I could see myself using that to manipulate things.
Absolutely. Like
I'm real selfish, so I'm just going to keep acting selfish, or I don't know.
I'm really nervous about sitting by myself over here. I just wonder if anybody's going to sit with me, but I'll be okay. That is total manipulation.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I'm really nervous, can you come sit with me? Like, the answer is yes or no, right? I mean, you probably don't have worries about people sitting with you, but I'm saying these types of things that we go
I just avoid social situations, so I don't.
We try to. I try to as well. They're not my favorite thing. But again, because I own my feelings, I don't worry about impressing people anymore. At work, I want to impress with my work product.
And so you started to confront and interact with your feelings that you had packed up for some time.
Oh,
and
my
I mean,
God, years.
After 2 divorces and raising children, you've got to have quite a backup.
A lot of feelings. And that were because my motto was 2 things. What's the point? It's not going to change anything to wallow in whatever. And
as you were packing the feelings up, or as you were letting them go?
If it would come up a little bit, like, oh, that really makes me mad. Oh, well, why would it be mad? Because it's not going to solve anything anyway. Boom.
Put it in the backpack. It was done. Keep carrying it.
Right. But I didn't think I was done. I thought it was gone.
Right.
But it really wasn't ever gone.
Ooh.
And so the other thing that, and I didn't realize again, probably 5 or 6 years ago, but it's kind of a pessimistic thing, and I consider myself a optimistic person, is hope for the best but expect the worst. And I'm like, that's how I live my life. So this is really funny because I've said this to a couple people, they don't believe it, but every time in my career when somebody said there's going to be an emergency meeting in the conference room at 10, I'd be like, yeah, we're going to get a bonus, we're going to get a raise, they're going to tell us to leave for the afternoon. And everybody else says, they're laying us all off. Like, who's going? And they're going to that place. And I'm always thinking something great is behind that door.
Right.
And so I most often am disappointed.
I'm seeing a great little video clip of everyone just in file with their heads down, and you're kind of doing a dance going in.
It's true. Yeah, that is so. That is true. And so
you're all fired. This is such an opportunity.
Oh no, that's not good. But so I always have done that, and then I go, hey, I don't have any expectations. So when it doesn't happen, I'm not really disappointed because what have I lost? I didn't have anything I expected anyway.
Right.
So that's not really fair to myself or to others to have no expectations. So it took me a while.
Now, why is it not fair to not have expectations of others?
I think that, I'm saying it's not fair because I think it's... I've
found a lot of freedom in low expectations.
How would you feel if would you feel anything if I came here saying, I'm not even going to worry about it because I'm not thinking
Well, I
he's a
don't
big
verbalize
cheese.
it.
Yeah,
But I don't expect, like, I realize how insufficient and everything I can be at times. And I use that as a way of not necessarily having low expectations of others in a bad way, but as a way of saying, like, Trent, you drop the ball all the time. You can't, and there's valid reasons sometimes as to why you drop the ball. And these people, though you might not know it right now exactly why, they might have a very valid reason why they are that's going on behind the scenes. So just, pat them on the back and say, that's all right. I'll talk to you later or whatever. Is that not really having low expectations, or?
I don't know. I think you said it when you said you don't necessarily express it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel maybe I'm projecting. So I would hate for someone to have I would hate that I came with no expectations to anybody. I mean, in some ways that's a gift.
Yeah.
But in some ways I equate it with having low estimation. Like why? Like I don't expect anything out of them anyway. Like what does that say about your esteem and how you hold them in
Right.
your esteem?
See, I have a weird thing. Like growing up, no one expected anything out of. Like I never felt like people thought I could do anything, really. Like I knew my parents loved me, and would be proud of me no matter what. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of freedom in that.
Yep.
But there was never, oddly, I never felt like anyone expected, like, Trent's going to do great things. I don't think I've done great things. But what I'm saying is that I knew personally that I could do exactly whatever I wanted to do, given enough thinking and hard work. I just did. And everything that I wanted to happen, I worked towards those ends. And I tried to infuse, as much of a pushback against all of that in accordance to, like, standard, morals and expectations. I wasn't going to, I want to be I wasn't going to push some desire or will that was inappropriate or anything else. But, I wanted to go live at the beach and live out of my car all summer when I was 17. And I made it happen. And I made it happen for several other friends. And it was just a thing like that. That was like, I wanted to do this. It happened. And so I started doing other things where I thought, I would like that to happen. Well, what do you have to do? You have to do all these things to then do this, to then make that happen. So I do that. And I never, and I kept doing things that people seemed to be very surprised by. Like, we never expected you to be able to do anything. And in my own head, I was like, I always knew I could do it, but I also at the same time knew you didn't expect that I could do anything, but that's fine.
It doesn't matter to you that they didn't expect that you could do anything.
No, but I also would think that I'm weird slightly on the spectrum of, if there's a spectrum and there's a line where people say they're on the autistic spectrum, I think I'm just on the other side of the line. I'm not going to claim I'm autistic in any way, but I'm real close to being close to being on the,
Yeah, I get it.
So there's an oddity to me. I get that. And sometimes it's a benefit and sometimes it's Trent's kind of weird, I don't know.
I like to call it being complicated sometimes. I mean, and I say unique.
My wife might agree with you.
Right. I mean, it's, and sometimes that I'm feeling, I had a girlfriend and I, we both said we would call it fancy. We're just fancy. That sounds a nicer way than saying we're complicated or complex or all that. I don't know about expectations. It's funny that you picked up on that word. It has been a theme in my life, whether it's expectations by the rules we're supposed to follow, that we're supposed to get to church at a certain time, that followed me all through everything, that actually takes us way back to the beginning about expectations of others in leaders.
So, when I came to this conversation with you,
yes,
I didn't have any expectations, but from small earmarks in your email, even seeing your signature on the email and that you had different links, it started to create expectations, and the oddity of some of the things said in your first email gave me a little bit of an expectation of she's going to be an interesting conversation. And these were all contained within like one sentence, right? So there was some expectation there, but I didn't come to the conversation with like any overly high expectations or anything else. I think if you're curious enough, anyone can be interesting if you're brave enough to continually ask the questions.
Right.
But I don't know. I feel like I'm constantly trying to not have expectations.
Well, I think even the format in which you've obtained guests for this have shown that. Like, to just go out there and not put any qualifications on the invite on Craigslist. And when I wrote to you and just said, I was just, wrote you whatever flip answer. And I'm like, he doesn't know me from anything. And the fact that you answer and say, yeah, let's talk. And I was like, wait, remember, I couldn't believe you didn't do a screening call. It is just trusting, right? So,
I mean, what's there to be scared of? I mean, if you bring a knife or a gun, that's going to be awkward. But other than that, awkward to die. Yeah. But I mean, what's really? I had a guest that, was, and that was awkward, but it was cool.
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
Yeah. And do you learn from everyone you do? Do you take away something? Is it helping you?
Yeah.
That's what I'm so impressed about with this, is that it feels like it's about giving something to the world, but also helping you process.
This is all about me processing. And I know by me processing, but sharing it, that it helps others.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, a very self-centered thing. I am doing this. I assigned myself this whole thing just so I would take faith seriously, right? I started this whole process of starting Vast Noodle and doing this documentary because I came to a point where I was either like, I'm going to look into this or I'm going to just let it go, right? And I knew if I'm going to look into this, I might as well do it in a creative manner and in a manner that puts my feet to the fire to actually get to the bottom of this. So I assigned myself, again, things to make that happen. And I'm still on that journey. And some people have been able to benefit from it. And it's my personal opinion that these kind of conversations that are open and truly asking, sometimes uncomfortable questions and discussing things that might upset some people, that are very, very valuable. Mm-hmm. And sharing the experience of like, yes, I live with doubt. I have doubts, and I might be an atheist. I don't know. I'm an agnostic currently. Mm-hmm. Just being able to say that at least brings the conversation to the surface and holds people accountable that might have been able to just skip down the lane and not really be challenged on some of their inappropriate things being put in the certainty corral. And I think that's a good thing.
It's great. So you identify as agnostic today?
I would say that. And I would...
Would you check a box on a form?
Yeah, because some days I truly do believe, like, I think there might be something. Yes. And then other days I'm like, shit, there's nothing.
Oh.
And it hurt. It's just that heart explosion and emotions in your head, like, oh no, there's nothing,
And what does nothing mean to you?
But that this is all just 100% by dumb luck, chance, and it means nothing.
And you die?
You die and there's nothing, Now, I've come to a point of realizing that most likely, I'd say it's a 99% likelihood that death is the same as before you were born.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Which is nothing,
well, nothing that you remember today.
Nothing that I remember today. And I don't remember it being painful because I don't remember it.
Right.
And I had no angst about it or anything else. All I have is the current pain of realizing the magnitude of the incomprehensible luck that we have to be here right now, sharing this experience and experiencing this life. It's astounding. And then it's all going to go away. And that is the most painful thing, right? And, deal with that. I don't know. Now I could be wrong. There could be something after this. I can't rule it out, but I don't know.
I understand, and I see the pain. I've never gotten to the point where I think it's nothing.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm agnostic. I definitely don't. But if I think that atheist means, it just means a higher power of some kind.
Atheist means a higher power of some kind?
I'm asking you.
Well, the technical definition of atheist is atheist, kind of like asexual,
yes.
like no sex.
Yeah.
It's just they lack belief in a god or gods. They would say God or
power.
Gods or power.
So I know I'd make a distinction between a person or personification of some kind of current that's always around us. And I told you I've always been fascinated with death, and as a young girl, when I started reading novels, I read a lot of the occult stuff and just have always been attracted to that. And just learning different funerary rites and different customs, and it's just been something I don't know, it's always been there right beside me. Mm-hmm. So I had gotten to a place in my life, I was in my 30-ish, and I really felt like I believed in reincarnation. I felt like it explained a lot. It filled in lots of holes.
I wouldn't completely disagree with you there.
And there was a book that felt life-changing to me that was called A Soul's Journey, and I read it all those years ago, and I remember it changing things. And then my father died, and then my mother got sick. And I ended up quitting my job to take care of her, and she was at home when she died. We had sisters that would help as well. And with her death, so my father had died, and that didn't challenge any of my beliefs. My beliefs were, I feel like it's reincarnation is the thing that I can most feel makes sense. And then there's that kismet. There's something, I feel like sometimes things just work out for me. And you could call it luck, I don't know. I just, so anyway, when my mom died, I just couldn't imagine her being reincarnated as someone else. So I wanted to picture her. Like, what do I picture this person that was here beside me yesterday, and how does she exist if she does exist? And, it's then when I started thinking instead of feeling, right, that sound never ends. So, right, sound waves don't stop. Yeah. So what about the energy of a person? Like, that somebody is not just their body. And so what's the end of that? And does it need air to breathe? It just all questioned everything. And basically since that time, which was 93, I don't know what I believe. I know what I don't believe.
Have you heard of, I think it's called apathetic theology?
No.
It's a study of God in the negative, as in studying all the things that an idea of God would not be. And when you look into the technical definitions of it and its boundaries or whatever, it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. I think it's apathetic theology, but if you remind me, I'll email you a link. Okay. But when I read over it, it was like, it's just to me, it's another tool and a way of looking at things that kind of gives a little bit helps clear up certain parts of the picture, if you will.
So back to your, coming to the crossroads of making the decision that you either need to put the work into it and figure it out, or just let it be.
Yeah.
How do you think your life will change if you make one of those choices?
I'm at the point now of feeling like I'll never be able to make one of those choices. I realize that it's, the journey of, exploration is the destiny.
That's right.
You can't. I was just talking again about this yesterday. You've heard the saying "God of the gaps" theology.
Yep.
And people say something unexplainable. Well, that's God.
That's God, right? Right.
Or God does it. In a way, I feel like that's appropriate, but it's a twisted way. If you keep using a objective, materialist, empirical point of view or process of inquiry to look into the gaps as a way of discerning what's truth and everything else, eventually, by investigating into the gaps is where you find either God or the lack of God, right? So looking into all the unexplainable is what we have still to do as further inquiry. Now, honestly, think it's all kind of fractal. Do you know what that means?
Yes.
That it's like you're continually zooming in on something that is one thing,
Right.
and then it goes to another. And it feels like everything is just infinitely fractal, where, you stand on the beach and you look at the horizon and you think, truth is on that horizon. And as soon as you get to that horizon, the truth has gone further.
Right.
It will always, the end result of this search will always be a horizon type of situation. It's never going to be something that there's here and no further to go.
Right.
It just
Because
seems...
in your view of looking in that, again, I feel like it really means as your view as who you are today. If you look in that same gap in a year or 5 years from now, you will see different things because you have grown and accumulated experience and different thoughts and ideas that are going to inject your bias on that view as well.
Sure.
Right? So it's ever changing. It's an interesting thing because I don't feel a need to define. I used to want to know. So I love to know. I love to get to the bottom of everything. I tend to overanalyze, or I'll keep looking beneath the surface. That can be a really helpful skill to have. But
Right.
I don't feel a need to know. I think I don't know why. I just feel carefree. Whatever it is, it is. I don't. And yet I believe, again, that there's something guiding forces somewhere. There's too many strange things that can't be explained intellectually, right? It's again,
Right.
it's trying to put words and intellectualizing the feelings that are hard. I don't know how you do it.
So the, material, you're obviously not a materialist, but you
I like
wouldn't...
to think I'm not.
Yeah, you wouldn't deny that the materialist points of view have value in discerning material things.
Absolutely.
But you would also be saying that there, as a mystic, that there's more to this whole thing that is inexplicable within the words that we're capable
yes.
of. Right.
And maybe unknowable.
And then maybe unknowable. And
And
hopefully
that's big.
death is that gate by which we go through, that we then go into that, and this continues. It would be my hope. People ask me if I believe. I say I hope.
You hope.
That's all I can do at this point. So I came to a realization, a mental picture for me, and again, I've probably said this on this podcast. Sorry, I'm going to repeat myself. Like a materialist point of view, you know what a jumbotron is.
Yes.
So a materialist point of view to me is like standing 1 inch from the jumbotron. What you're going to do is you're going to see a red, green, and a blue dot,
Right.
RGB.
Right.
And that will be the material truth of what's happening right there, right?
Yeah.
Right there.
Yes,
You
get it.
see it.
Yeah.
But you will not get the full picture
Correct.
because you're 1 inch from it.
Right.
Now, if you back up, 100 feet,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're going to see that two people are getting engaged,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, these material data points are telling you the bigger picture that's
Yes.
going on elsewhere.
Yes.
So at the same time, a mystical point of view and a materialist point of view are equally valid. You don't get that mystical perspective without the
Right.
interaction with the material points of view as well. And there's ways that you can misstep and overstep on both parts of that are not justifiable, right? The mystical point of view or the spiritual or religious point of view can't come in and determine right or wrong within a materialist
Right.
scientific process. Like, these are undeniable, but they mean pretty much nothing.
Right.
They only mean the data point that it encapsulates, period.
Right.
But you can use all those data points to, create a trajectory towards maybe not final destination, but a potential destination of truth.
Yes.
And when all those data points line up, you can start to create a picture beyond. But unless you're there, measuring those data points there, you can't really make it a materialist thing, but you can project a picture. And that's where that mystical point of view comes in and becomes a little bit more helpful, I think, in that process of discerning meaning and purpose and all that.
And so to be evolved is to have the view of being able to adjust your view depending on what you're trying to see. I mean, it shouldn't be an either or. we have to embrace both sides of that, because the
Yeah, I
dot,
think so.
the pixel is the whole is only as good as the sum of all its parts.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
things matter on the small scale and the large scale. And so how does a human trying to figure out their place in the world and their world place in the it or the is, how do you go between those places and not become insane?
Right.
Right? I mean,
right.
sometimes it's so huge to think about that you almost are looking over the edge and going, whoa, like if I actually look in there, that's going to blow my mind.
Well, yeah, there's the idea of, I actually have that drawn out. So weird. You are such a doppelganger. I have that drawn out on a sticky note, this line going across a sticky note, and the stick man's on the edge of that abyss.
Yeah.
And over there is, the abyss of, nihilistic atheism to a degree. To me, that's what it represents, the depth of all of that. That's just incomprehensible. So to me, to write all that off and leave it as nihilistic atheism is to fall into that. And I just don't want to, pragmatically, I just don't want to be there. I don't, like, my wife and I just spent our 17-year anniversary in London. And for the first 2 days, I was a nasty person to be around because I was so pessimistic and cynical about, like, what's it all mean? It's just horrible, just negative and cynical. And she didn't complain. She's an eternal, upbeat, extrovert, happy person. And, she's probably the only person that could ever put up with me in that way. But, towards the end of the first 2 days, I was just like, geez, if I had to hang around me, that would suck.
Right.
And, at some point you have to choose to at least put 1 foot in one and 1 foot in the other, and allow for the embrace of that mystical experience of joy. I mean, and it can even get to the point where, like, sex seems like an insect type of interaction, where it's like a little part of one, on the nature show gets hard, and the other, then the female gets moist, and it becomes this just mechanical, like, it doesn't mean anything. There's and like, even in my own life, when I consider it, like, I'd start to feel that way towards it. And I was like, man, where am I going to where your most basic instincts of reproduction are being affected by this, materialist point of view, that I'm not able to to pull myself out of that and just experience the beauty of something.
Right.
That, it's kind of a wake-up call to say, you're going to become a very hard and grumpy old man that's very unpleasant to be around, or you're going to choose to step back into the beauty of things and appreciate that and move forward in that, while not completely disregarding this. But I'm such a all into whatever I'm into that I think I went too far in that materialist inquiry, and it took a toll on my emotions and my life, and able to see beauty. I have another sticky note. I have a room full of sticky notes. I look like a crazy man if you ever saw it. But like, the most beautiful parts of life become the most painful when you lose your faith sometimes, because in that beautiful moment of connection and empathy, like with your own child, you then feel like this is nothing and this is it, and it will never be. Now, some people will say, because this is temporary, it becomes that much more valuable. Well, maybe if you've been raised to think that other way, but if you've been raised to think this is beautiful and it will be here later, to lose that is like being at a factory job that you loathe, thinking you have a weekend off, while everyone else knows that the boss is making you all work the weekend, and the bell rings and you're splitting to go to the lake and fishing and, drink beers for the weekend, whatever. And then everyone looks at you like, no, we have to stay, and you've just lost your weekend. It's that crushing moment.
It's the disappointment in things aren't what they seem.
Yeah.
And how do you get over that will continuing to be inquisitive and curious and trying to get to something that doesn't haunt you.
Yeah, I feel, you ever see the videos of the recycling machines that are two metal things and they just go like that and they'll throw a couch in and it just slowly started to feel like life was that, and that represented death.
Wow.
And it's like everything's thrown in there, and it's just eventually it's just a maw of death and destruction coming for you. It's just, and at some point you just have to choose to be open to the mystery of why things are beautiful, and to continue to look into that, and to use a materialist approach in that as well, but to also allow yourself to be bathed in that mystical beauty of what is and the experience of being alive, So it's a hard thing.
I think that I don't know where it came from, and I think again it has increased the older I've become. Is I find joy in everything. It's not like I never get down or I'm not critical, but like, wow, what a great night we got to take a drive, and I saw this road that I've never seen before. And like simple things. It doesn't have to be big. It's just the always discovering, and I think I happen to try to practice gratefulness, or I just am. And I like, if we're late for something, but it means that we took this detour that brought us to a place we would have never known, that's actually a gift.
Right.
And it doesn't bother me. And like, even just road rage, right? Like, I don't have road rage generally. I would say maybe once every 6 months, there's somebody that's just making me mad, but really my ego's not in it. I'm just doing my thing, and I just assume everybody's doing their best. And if they're doing their best and they're cutting me off, I don't assume intention. I think they cut me off. I don't know why. And I always make up stories. So that is probably a coping, right? So I make up these stories that can rationalize these things in my head. So my son he is a vocal driver, and he's like, oh yeah, this guy's going to pass me, and he's making these comments. I said, what does that impact your life? Well, why should he do that? I said, well, why shouldn't he? You don't know what his story is. Maybe he's going to the hospital. I go to these places where I think I rationalize that there is no evil intent, that people generally are good, I guess that's what I believe, that I believe in the goodness of people.
I believe people have a choice to be good, but I know that were I to decide to embrace my selfish side, the malevolence that I could achieve, right? To admit, that's the thing. I wrote that down on another sticky note this morning, that we live in such a guarded, shielded, artificial environment, being in this safe, well-to-do country. Your
shadows don't need to come out in the light much.
Yeah, we think we're good people, but have you ever been starving and had to think like, I could steal this from this other family, because if I don't, just the drive of starvation. Yeah. Like, who among us has really experienced that? And every person that whines about people attempting to come across the border, all of them, I would think, would admit, where if you were that person and the drug cartels were killing off your family, you mean to tell me you wouldn't be swimming across that river? Right. Now, I'm still not so much to say that we have to like extinguish our borders or anything like that. But the empathy of dealing with people in a lesser situation and what can be done about it, I think that needs to be embraced and considered, because, as soon as you start thinking you're a good person, man, we've just never really been tested to the level of so many other times in history have. And there's outliers, and we turn them into saints.
That's right.
Of these outliers that said, I'm at this point and I have this incredibly difficult decision to make. Right. Will I victimize others to put myself first, or will I stand up and risk my neck to help others,
But I have a question. Your word struck me of malevolence. So my ultimate question is, since you've been on this journey and you've been looking and searching and getting the answers and recognizing that you've said several times that you've self-centered person, now that you've recognized it and you're working to change it, has that changed your happiness? Do you feel as a happier person? You said you can be a
I
pessimist.
recognize the better, the more uplifted disposition of the ones I love around me.
Wow.
And that's really...
That's a gift.
We interviewed a guy when we went across the country. His name's Frank Schaefer, and his father was a huge, Francis Schaefer, huge guy in the evangelical movement.
Mm-hmm.
And he now is both atheist and believer. He's, essentially an agnostic. But he really speaks out against the kind of, to a degree, patriarchal norms and everything else that imbued him with this me, I'm the man, yada, 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 and didn't put into check and protect his family from the vibrato or the man that was him, right? And he came to a breaking point in realizing to look into the faces of those that are around him that he was influencing, and to see the pain and suffering that he was causing, to take that as a litmus test of how you were doing, to really look into the eyes and to spend the time. And are you looking into the eyes of others to gauge how you're doing, or are you just looking self-referentially how you're feeling? He said it in a more succinct manner, but I 100% can see the engagement of my children and the happiness and more contentment of my wife. And that's really...
And it's obviously, you have emotions with that. And so what is that emotion?
I don't know. It just, it makes me really, really happy to know that the things that I value most are flourishing. But, like before, I thought I was valuing all of us the most, but I was really valuing me most. But I guess there's a sense of I've come closer to the truth of what really affects me and having a longer term influence. And there's a deeper peace in that, I imagine, that is creating the emotions of knowing that.
So I'm just going to say this. I am struck by your humility and your depth of feelings, and I want to go back and I'm going to listen to this because I want to know if you said I am self-centered or I have a tendency to be self-centered, or is it a tendency to act self-centered? And I don't like the labels you give yourself sitting here, and I understand and appreciate your honesty about it, but it's kind of like I have the tendency to have a short temper, but I am not a short temper. I am me and my bumps and lumps and all of myself.
It doesn't define you, even though you have a tendency for that.
No, and every time you say I was or I had a tendency to be self-centered, I'm in multiple places looking at you, and one of them is, wow, that's brave. And I said that, brave and courageous, to say that out loud and to hear your own voice saying that. And you hear people talking about the power of saying in the mirror, I'm beautiful, like those messages. Yeah. You're continuing to give yourself those messages that almost feels like I'm just going to say it. It feels like self-flagellation to me that you are saying it out loud.
There's a degree of that maybe, but it's not it's something that, by saying that, I know I've admitted that, and I'd imagine there's a degree of pride in there as well.
Well, that's good.
That like, okay, I've been able to admit this, and I'm proud of that. So there's
I get
pride
that, right?
there.
That's why I think there's courage and pride. I just feel like you feel to me as someone with the intent and curiosity and depth and just a big-hearted person, that you were behaving in a way that wasn't getting you what you needed in your life, and it was causing harm to others. And so you made a change. But I don't think that you're that person at heart that was behaving in a certain way. I think that maybe that was a reaction to something else. And so do you know, it sounds like part of you is have you found a way to name your true self? Because you're like labels. I think you like to label things.
That's possible.
I don't know. That's pretty.
So what was that
vocal.
question again?
It
That struck
was
me.
a question about is the way that you're behaving, the old you, your behavior, not you, your behavior, was it a reaction to something else? Instead of this is who you are at core.
Now I've tried to argue several times with my wife that a lot of the ways I was behaving were reinforced by. I'm not an extreme left person, and I don't even like saying the term patriarchal anymore because I feel like it's misrepresented and overstated in some ways. I'll admit, obviously, it's been overdone and it's been oppressive. I get that. But I feel that in the very the man is the leader of the home and the woman shall stay home and I feel that, you take this whole book, you put it in a place of certainty, and it defines roles, and it defines right and wrong, but yet there's so many people that come up with all these different outcomes of belief and outcomes of how people live. The specific thing that I was involved in, Seventh Adventism, which has a lot of great people in it and a lot of good things about it. It's just not for me anymore. I'll leave it at that. I feel like parts of it, the way I took it, might have reinforced some of my behavior or allowed me to justify it to myself to a degree.
Like a sense of entitlement that came with the message? I'm not sure I'm translating that or
kind of a sense of entitlement of I am the leader
because of your
and
gender.
People need to listen. Yeah, people need to listen to me, and I need to have control and a say.
That was the model that you were brought up with, right?
To a degree, there's always going to be a more dominant figure in relationships generally. And this is something that's very interesting to me that I've come to understand even more so by getting close to people that are in the gay community, that they do not escape roles of masculine and feminine in a stereotypical manner as well.
Right.
There's so it's just interesting. And yeah, I sometimes think that might have had somewhat of at least dulled my perception of really being more fair about everything. Or like my wife, when we first were married, she worked as a physical therapist in Gorham and would, drive 45 minutes to work before it was light out and drive back after. And I still expected her to cook, clean, blah, 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 blah. And, I was working as well, trying to start an architecture business, and then I was trying to start a photography business. It's paid off for her in the long run, but back in those days, it was kind of like I wasn't lifting enough of a finger to help in those things and expecting her to pay for everything and clean and cook. And I still went on surf trips, it's such an a-hole, and so like how did I justify that in my mind? I think a lot of it just came with, well, these are your defined roles, honey, and you need to do those. And she wasn't pushing back enough. She should have put me in my place, or at least had a very direct conversation with me about it more than she did. I'm sure she attempted to in her way that in our young marriage was insufficient for dealing with the depth of my self-centeredness at the time, I would say. Okay. And we were talking about this just the other day, and I think the problems in our marriage were probably an 80-20 thing, right? Like she had some responsibility, but not as much as me. So, that being said, I haven't put a lot of thought into it, but I would think that there are degrees of a very traditional conservative religion that reinforce a self-centered nature around the male part of the relationship, you know?
Yeah. So I think that makes sense. And it kind of goes back to the initial conversation we had about opportunity, equal opportunities, and traditional male-female roles in the workplace and how those were filled. And so as much as I have always, since I became aware of inequality or injustice, have been very vocal about it, like being able to be a single parent and working, having a good job and being a leader and all that stuff, it was never anything I wanted. What formed my picture of what I wanted in my life was like watching the Waltons on TV. You're probably way too young, but you've seen it. So, you know, it's a giant family with, you know, it takes, like during the Depression era, 8 kids. That was my dream. So I never wanted a career. I never wanted anything. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom with a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And so you can't really equate that gut instinct, right, of this is the person that I think I want to be, but this is what my life is bringing me. And so I had to change course and drive that direction. Do I think, and going back to that question, are there, you know, considering what the data is showing in the studies they were doing in Scandinavia, that are there traditional things that because of our gender we're drawn to and we're better suited for? It doesn't mean everything shouldn't be open, but it's interesting to think about what that means for me as a person in the world, but for everybody that doesn't even have any thought about it. They're just taking that path.
Right.
I don't even know how I connected that to what you were just saying.
Well, the stereotypical roles of a traditional conservative
and how that
religion,
supported
and
your
then you
belief
take
system.
Programming of a
programming
bygone
was there.
era
My God.
that gives this picture to
Right.
you, and you know you're obviously going to physically identify with, you know, a strong female role in that story.
Yep.
And, you know, maybe not obviously, but it's most likely that you would identify with the people that at the most shallow levels visually look like you, and you're like, oh, that looks like fun, the way they portray it.
Yeah.
I'd like to be that person.
Yeah.
And maybe there's, you know, truth because they're portraying it that way because it's a stereotype, because it is true for a bell curve of the population. And that's fine. I really don't want to get, and I'm not saying I don't want to get there in this conversation. What I'm saying is I don't want to get to a place in our society where we're trying to skew a natural bell curve.
Right.
Right? Now, just because I'm naturally selfish doesn't mean I shouldn't try and change that, though. So there's all these things that kind of come into play that, you know, if I mean, I would never be able to be successful and do a good job at being a teacher, staying home with young children. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't naturally succeed at. But there's other things that I thrive at, that I'm drawn to and want to do. I mean, I have a very weird old van, not old, well, kind of old van. Men are shown to be far more visual than women as far as how they process, and far more interested in mechanical things, mechanical shapes and stuff. When I drive around in this van, 99% of the time, men are like, you know, dog and a dog whistle, right? And like,
interesting.
1% of the time is a woman ever like, hey, you know, and it's just we're in a bell curve of natural distribution, but that in no way means that we should enforce that because you're this, that, or the other, that you have to be in the meat of the bell curve. There will be outliers.
Right.
And that's completely fine. So that's where that equality of opportunity is so incredibly important. But to skew and manipulate the whole thing as an equality of outcome is inappropriate, I think.
So I think I agree. I agree that it's inappropriate. I totally agree that there's a natural distribution. And what I really think the key is to try to let go of assumptions, right? So
that's hard, though, because you have to be critical and judgmental on things, but that doesn't mean you have to do assumptions. So sorry to interrupt
Oh,
you
it's
there.
okay. Assumptions
I
are a
think out
big
loud
pet
too
peeve.
much.
Oh, it's good. I do too. But my assumptions are a big pet peeve of
Yeah.
mine, for many reasons. I think it goes back to justice. I think assuming people are a certain way, cultures behave a certain way, any of them. I think holidays, I'm sure I've messed with my family several times because let's not assume we're going to do Thanksgiving at your house on this
Right.
day. Why don't we ask? And that's a lot more work, but and there are traditions that we stick to, but my kids, it drives them crazy because I'm like, let's not have tradition. Let's see what we want to do. Every year is a new year. And
Right.
and so there's a part of me that wants to take the time because you know what? I'm a different person this year than I was last year, and you may be too. And I don't know what's going on in your head, but let's talk
Right.
about this. Just a quick illustration that I actually thought I was really proud of. So here I was, neither of my ex-husbands really had an influence on my children's life. And I brought them up myself, and I have a lot of sisters. And so my son was surrounded by women and me. He still will tell me he calls it Mother's Day for Father's Day. So like he took me to lunch because it's a father with an M.
Yeah.
But when he was growing up, I would say to him as a child, as I started to even gay got on my mind and homosexuality and what does that mean and fairness and support. And so he'd be a little kid and I'd say, it's going to be so great when you bring home your husband or wife and we want to meet him. Or just think if someday if you choose you want to be married and then if you want to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. So we did this till probably he was in 7th grade and he's finally like, Mom, I am not gay. And I'm like, it's okay. I just wanted you to know if you can't, like I was so clear on setting
Right,
that expectation for him. I know some people had a problem with that just thinking that you put it as a possibility.
Right.
But I really do think it's about really challenging assumptions every step of the way that you can. And our own assumptions.
That's a huge, issue in my head right now with my current situation that I watch my boys when they're around, girls their age, and from the amount of attention and quietness that they get from when other girls are around, I'm pretty sure they're both straight. But were that not to be the case, how do I balance my side of the equation in that dynamic where my wife is still very religiously conservative? And I have to be extremely careful and respectful of the situation and environment that we started our marriage in.
Yep.
Because I'm the one that's changing.
You got it.
So that it's a really hard call on my part to not speak up when and I usually do if I feel it's valid, but to say, all right, my beliefs have changed. I know we were dated and married and in this atmosphere of belief, and now I'm the one changing. I think it would be inappropriate for me to raise a stink and try and pull everyone out of that. And it's been very difficult not to have continual arguments or discussions even about that around the kids, because that's very difficult for kids to be around.
Right.
And we've tried to keep that out of, their view as much as possible. But I still think it's good for kids to be able to observe people have discussions about difficult things productively.
Yes.
But at the same time, my children believe in God, and to see their father not believe in it, I've seen it cause them stress, and I know they worry about it. And they need consistency, and they need simplicity of belief at this point in their life.
Right.
So that's a really hard thing.
I can't imagine that part. And a very logistical question. Does your family pray at dinner?
Yeah, they always pray at dinner.
And what do you do?
I bow my head with them, but I don't pray anymore because I feel like I'm lying.
Do they notice? Does everybody notice?
Yeah, it's a very stereotypical thing, to like ask the husband to pray for the meal,
Yes.
But my wife's a very, she's such a great leader, but she won't really too far put herself in that role in spiritual situations or religious situations because the Adventist church doesn't, I don't think yet, ordain women as leaders in the church, So it's a very fluid and odd dynamic that, that my older son will he's happy to pray for the meal and get on with it, you know. And my younger son doesn't like to be put on the spot in front of people. And usually my wife will defer, would you like to pray? Like, no, you go ahead. And it's just a constant, no, you go ahead. And, you know, I don't want to be disingenuous about it. And the few times that people other than my wife have asked me to pray, I'm fine to say what I know people want to hear. And so I do that. So
it just is interesting because I was thinking about, as you just articulated, the challenge of the family and those stereotypical roles, and what does that mean? And what is your wife comfortable with that you're now saying, well, I'm not sure that I feel that I fit that role the same way I did.
Now say that again.
When you're saying that the challenges of having a family as you're challenging your belief system, and wrapped up in that belief system is a belief and comfort with stereotypical roles. And you're saying, maybe that doesn't, now that I have a different belief, or I'm finding a new belief or exploring that doesn't feel as clear that this is male, this is female. Right. I want you to carry the mantle a little bit with her to say, you may have a desire that she says the prayer.
Oh, she'll pick up anything and run with it. She is a force to be reckoned with. Yeah. To be clear.
But she wants, but it sounds like she appreciates the traditional spiritual supported models of a traditional man, woman, family with kids.
In an ideal setting. So, like when we were first married,
yes,
you know, I was like, all right, I'm the spiritual leader of the home. Let's come together and we'll have worship now at this hour. Yeah. And, you know, and she's like, I'm not doing that right now. I got other stuff to do and you're not going to control my time. You know, and so there was this constant battle of within me, like, I got to set the spiritual tone here. I got to get people together. I got to do this. And then it was a constant, like, you're not going to control me. You're not going to control my time. So she definitely wanted a spiritual husband and a spiritual leader in the home. But there's also she's a very strong, very independent person. So I believe that she has an ideal that she struggles with. Yeah. Okay. Now that's obviously me speaking for her. And you know, and I did a podcast with her that is on the podcast that you can listen to. She's a very intelligent, very articulate, well-spoken, thoughtful person. We just see things differently, and she can speak faster and more eloquently on most of it. So there was that initial, time in our lives where I was trying that, and I was getting nowhere. And I think a lot of it, I've been told, was that I was trying to control the situation too much. I don't honestly know that that's it. I still have some reservations about, her just background and what she expected and what she was going to refuse that anyone be too much in control of her life. She's very independent. And very capable of being independent. So there's a lot of just internal conflict there, I think. Now that she is devoid of having a spiritual male figure in the home, she's filling the role very courageously, vehemently, whatever. And
I saw robustly when you did
that. Very robust, yes. She's fulfilling that role on her own in a robust manner, and has become, in my observation, far more religious as a reaction to my journey. I think so. So,
I just picked up on a couple things that I think that I am feeling empathy, because when you said, I'm picturing your family, and that you started out and now all of a sudden one of these things is not like the other, right? So there's a sense of, yes, you're changing, and then you have a family of 3 other people that are still on the same viewpoint around that, and how that must feel. I don't know. I think if I were in your shoes, there would be a sense of guilt and a sense of loneliness. Yep. But you're still staring into the fire, and so that's what's commendable.
Yeah, it's very hard, especially when her side of the family gets together. Her side of the family is just generally far far more conservative as personality types to a degree. And she has twin brothers who are very, very religious men, spiritual and religious men. And they lead out, and they have kids that they sit and they read with. And I'm around it, and I observe it. And there's a lot of guilt associated with knowing that everyone that I'm close to, that's, my immediate family, still would love for me to be that person. Were I to do that, it would be extremely disingenuous at this point, So that's really hard. Now, to all of their credit, no one is condemning or dismissive or trying to walk me out of communion with them. It's not an Amish shunning situation by any stretch. They're all very respectful, and I know they all do their best to love me. I don't know that genuinely everyone appreciates me, but they're all very respectful, and I commend them for that, and while knowing that it's probably very difficult for them.
It's and I think about, again, I'm putting myself in your wife's shoes, which I can't do, but it's so, to me, speaks about the power of love, because it is that you guys are
pragmatic, man. When you look at the situation, I mean,
it's not only that. It can't be just pragmatic. I mean,
that's the other thing that I've come to question lately. Like, what, biblically, God is love, and that's the closest definition I can get to God at this point. But what is love? To me, it still seems self-centered. Like, if it didn't feel good to express love, in every situation that I can think of expressing love, it will feel good to you. It feels good to me that I've made myself uncomfortable in the short term to have long-term deep groundswell of peace, knowing that I've done the right thing and I've put my wife and my children on a more even keel with a slightly more selfless husband and father in their life, right? But that still feels good to me.
It's what's in it for you. It's right. So
I still don't understand that.
Well, so that's saying that the self-centeredness really is nature, right? So we are designed for self-preservation if you look at everything that we do. And so if that was your true nature and you didn't have to preserve yourself in this lovely world we live in, you weren't fighting for your life, but you were fighting for your being in a way that is your natural instinct to go back to. Maybe it is your natural instinct and everyone's natural instinct to be self-centered, because if that's what drives us and it also serves us, you could call it manipulation, right? So if you give something of yourself, I think it's impossible not to feel something when you give something, right? If I came, right? There's benefit.
Yeah.
It's both people benefit from it.
See, now that's where I get the I don't get anything out of my self-centered thought of I don't get anything out of going over to the soup kitchen and helping those people. I don't see how what I'm doing is going to help them. Like, to me, anyone else could be there putting the cornflakes out and the coffee and cleaning up, and the same thing would be happening. In fact, I'm so bad at small talk and conversation in that kind of a situation. I'm just, there's like my father-in-law could go there and brighten every single person's day there. He's incredible at that. Me, like you send me to the airport counter to see if I could get the upgraded seat, and they will actively want to downgrade my seat. You send my wife, they'll bump us to first class. And I've witnessed this on the same person, even knowing that I'm involved after the fact. I was like, got back and I was like, all right, sweetie, you need to go talk to him. Hey, So again, it's that I don't feel like I'm doing good there because I'm not feeling that connection to people?
You haven't done it.
I have. I went probably two, 3 times.
Didn't do anything for you.
Didn't do it, and that's a very self-centered statement. I helped but I certainly didn't get any feedback from it that was positive, other than like, Trent, you've done something that you didn't enjoy for the benefit of others.
That's not cutting it. So, right. So when I was volunteering, right, if you just went from purely altruistic motives, I shouldn't have stopped any of my prior volunteering trials because it was serving someone else. So I believe that what motivates me is serving and helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
That motivates me. So there's my win. So if I was completely altruistic and I didn't like doing the English as a second language tutor, I would have continued because I was serving someone else, and I would have subjugated my own needs for the volunteer experience.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
So I think I don't want to be a martyr. And I think that there are plenty of people in the world that give, and they're not getting anything out of it. If you continue to do that work of volunteering and you weren't getting anything out of it, I don't know that it would be helpful that it would be helpful. Right. Yeah. And so there are people that's a good fit for.
It's just not my calling.
It's not your thing.
I mean, I don't enjoy it, and I want to hear that it's not my calling.
Well,
right?
It's not your right thing. There's lots of people that if you feel a need, that's the first question. Do you feel a need to give?
Yes.
Well, then you just need to find the right place. So when I went to the Center for Grieving Children, I was there for a year and I stopped. And for the first 8 or 9 months, everybody would sit there and they would say how much they'd miss a week and they come back. I loved it so much. I love being here. I totally got into it because I am comfortable with death and thought I could help people. Mm-hmm. And I love children and I just wanted to be of service. And I'm a good facilitator. So in life, I've done a lot of facilitation. So I thought I could use that. I was like, and I finally got brave enough to say, I'm not feeling this. Like, you guys are loving this place and having all these feelings. I'm feeling obliged. And I come here, but I had made that commitment.
My parents go to this place, and I was using it as a substitute for church to make myself feel better about it, or at least knowing that I need a selfless practice of serving others that should be beneficial to me. But I don't enjoy it, and I don't even get fulfillment from it. You know, kind of like you don't enjoy a workout, but you feel that you improved things at the end of it. Yeah. It didn't feel that either. I don't feel like I helped any, really.
I think you need to honor your feelings. So you're intellectualizing that you should be doing this and using this as a model, but what you're feeling is saying that's not the right fit for me. Right. So for me, when I went there and I said something's missing, I was a little jealous that everybody else was getting feelings from this. And I was like, this isn't happening for me. And something shifted, and I don't know I know part of it was me, but something shifted, and I had a moment, and I was like, oh, I get it now. And it took me 8 months, and then I realized, okay, I'm enjoying it, but it is something that's a commitment every week. Excuse me. So now I sub, which is bringing joy to me. So I can go there, and guess what? I got rid of my expectations, the obligation. Subbing is I can choose to or not, and for me, I go with an open, free heart that way. And I don't feel like if I can't go, I'm going to disappoint anyone.
So you sub as a
facilitator. I'm a facilitator at the Center for Grieving Children. What I was saying, when I brought up the ESL because I realized I didn't like it. I wasn't finding it rewarding. I didn't like it. It was not what I wanted to do, what I envisioned. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get any joy out of doing it. And I thought just volunteering was enough, but it wasn't. And so selfishly, I stopped. If I was purely altruistic, I would have continued whether I enjoyed it or not.
Because you know that
I'm serving somebody.
Me being there is serving someone. But right. You looked at it as I need to be engaged in this, not just a one-sided thing of helping these people, but it needs to be a symbiotic relationship to a degree where we're both benefiting out of it, because that's really where more joy is going to be communicated and empathy will flow more freely.
Because it's not obligation, it's choice.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I feel like that's
that was
like
a sign.
It
was. We couldn't have made that happen. It was just gentle too, wasn't it?
This has been a really interesting conversation, and I am so glad that you decided to come down and talk. I think we should make this at least an annual event.
Deal.
And are you from Maine originally?
I'm from Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
So you'll be in the area.
I live right up the street. I live in Scarborough right now.
Okay, yeah. I noticed anything. Yep. So maybe even more than that. Maybe we need to figure out how to get you in like on a more like just to talk like even like about specific things maybe.
We could have a topic.
Like do some more things like that you're actually interested in, because this seems like this was a self-help thing for me the whole time.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. So here's what I was just going to say to you. You are in service of others of what you're doing now, because you have given me gifts today to make me think differently.
That's good.
And so it's selfish for you. It's your exploration.
Yeah.
But it's a gift to the person that finds himself on the other end of this conversation.
Well, that's
so you can't come away with this without something to think about and something that you've given me. So thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely would love to do this again.
Yeah.
And even if we had like things that you specifically think are, deeper below the surface things that you'd like to discuss, or even other people that you think would be good to talk to, and anything else, or you and someone else. We've done that where we've had 3 people on as well and kind of had like a somewhat round table conversation. So it's been really fun.
It's been great.
I really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Victoria.
I've been called
Jackson.
that before. It's Valerie.
Valerie.
It's okay. I've been called worse, but Victoria I get a lot.
We've been talking for what? Who knows?
all right.
Almost 3 hours, and I'm calling you by your wrong name.
That's all right.
I'm so
It's a
bad
V.
with the names.
It's okay.
Miss V.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming down. Really appreciate it, and we're gonna have to do this again.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you.